With Ghostbusters Frozen Empire hitting theaters in a few weeks, I thought now's a good time to start marathoning and reviewing the Ghostbusters films, starting with the original classic that came out in 1984. Let's review. So Ghostbusters is centered around four gentlemen who form an organization called the Ghostbusters, in which they go around catching ghosts. Basically, there's self-explanatory. There's no other way to describe it. But yeah, they basically go around New York City capturing ghosts, but then something happens in which now they have to save New York. Now, I'll admit, I do not have no real nostalgia or admiration or attachment to the Ghostbusters franchise. I've always heard about it, but I've never been attached to it. And if you're an 80s baby, then I understand why you would. But over the past couple of years, this franchise has also conjured up a lot of negativity, particularly when it comes to the newer movies, which I will get to at a later time. But this first film is where it all started, because it is a classic from the 80s. It is a classic among nerds. But after at least watching those first two films, honestly, I think people that get too overzealous over the originals and how they pale in comparison to the newer movies, I feel like that's just a little unfair. I mean, if let's be honest, Ghostbusters is just a silly sci-fi horror comedy that was only successful because of those four specific actors at that specific point in time, and everyone was on their best comedic A game, and it was just lightning in a bottle. That being said, I remember I watched Ghostbusters for the first time a little over 10 years ago and thought, okay, it was pretty good. And now watching it's like, I do have somewhat of a new appreciation for it. But again, only because of the actors, not for the concept itself. Though I will say I do appreciate the concept for the special effects. But then again, I'm a sucker for 80s special effects because of the practicality behind it. Because I'll tell you, I do wonder how they pull off some of the effects in this movie off. Particularly when it came to the giant marshmallow man and Slimer. Now, of course, I gotta talk about the cast, particularly Bill Murray, who plays Peter Venkman. Now, Bill Murray, I'll say he's not one of my favorite comedic actors, but I will say after watching him in this movie, I'm like, okay, I can see the hype behind him now. I mean, I'm not saying I never did, but I'm just saying like, this is Bill Murray at his best, because Bill Murray, he's just one of those lovable comedic actors that just has this don't give a fuck type attitude. And he definitely brought that to Venkman. Like, he's not the smartest person in the room, but that's just the joy of him in this movie. But that's just the joy of his character, is that he knows he's not the smartest person, so he's just taking everything in full stride, like everything he does with Dana. Like, he's just like, I know I'm not the best looking, but damn it, you are gonna like me. You're gonna find me enduring. Then there's Dan Aykroyd and the late Harold Ramis. Rest in peace. They play Ray Stentz and Egon Spengler. Ray Stentz, he just likes to over-explain things, and Egon, he's just the smartest person. He's the nerd. But that is what works about these group of characters. Everyone has their role, and everybody knows what their role is within the Ghostbusters. And it's also good that this movie was written by both Dan Aykroyd and Harold Ramis. Because for as silly as this plot is, they just knew how to take the piss out of things and just make this plot more funnier than it actually is. Especially when there's a scene where a ghost is showing Ray Stentz what that mouth does, if you know what I mean. But I also just like the formation of the Ghostbusters in this movie, and just the business aspect of it, and them trying to get cases, and then once they get that first case, and which is them getting Slimer, and once they're successful at that first case, you were just cheering for them. And there's the fourth Ghostbuster, played by Ernie Hudson, and yeah, he's basically the typical fourth black character in a group. And don't get me wrong, I love Ernie Hudson for him, but it is what it is. There's also the iconic Ecto-mobile. We all love that, you know. What can I say about that hasn't been said? Well, really, just Ghostbusters in general, what can I say about it that hasn't been said? There's Sigourney Weaver, who plays Dana, who is the love interest of Peter Venkman, and a year before she did Aliens. And one of the things I always loved about Sigourney Weaver is that she's just one of those actresses that she's not above anything, but she's not below anything. And she definitely took this movie and took it in stride. Even to the point where she is being possessed by a ghost, and she really went there. And she even gave me one of my favorite lines from this movie. There is no Dana, only Zool. Rick Moranis is in the movie, and God bless him, because I do know that he stepped away from acting to raise his family after his wife passed, and he passed on the opportunity to be in any newer Ghostbusters movies. And I know he said, like, why would I be a part of something that I already did? And I'm like, he gets it. But Rick Moranis in this movie, he was just the nerdy neighbor, which, as far as I know, as far as the movies I've seen him in, he's good at. I always thought the ending was fun, in which it involves the giant marshmallow man, and then there's Gozer, the giant marshmallow dude, and Gozer. That is where the movie comes to a head. But in the end, I'd say this was basically a good, feel-good movie and definitely a staple of the 80s. It may not be one of my favorite movies, but I will always have a spot in my heart for it and appreciation and admiration for it for what it was in the 80s. I'm going to give Ghostbusters the hard eyes emoji.